not print money. They also feared the power of the presidency. They felt that this was a quasi-monarchical office that would become like a king, and elected king, no doubt, but a king nonetheless.
By the spring of 1788, 8 states had ratified, some with the explicit understanding that a Bill of Rights would be added. Meanwhile, the powerful states of Virginia and New York were holding out. Without their support, the new Constitution was not likely to survive, and the opposition was fierce.
These lawyers and men of learning and moneyed men that talk so finely and gloss over matters so smoothly to make us poor illiterate people swallow down the pill, expect to get into Congress themselves. They expect to be the managers of this Constitution and get all the power and the money into their own hands. And then they will swallow up all us little folks, like the great Leviathan.
A series of essays began appearing in New York newspapers, arguing eloquently that the Constitution was the best guarantee of the future welfare of the United States.
The Federalist Papers were 85 papers written in New York by mostly Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, designed to convince New Yorkers to ratify the Constitution.
In the extended Republic of the United States, and among the great variety of interests, parties, and sects which it embraces, a coalition of a majority of the whole society could seldom take place on any other principles than those of justice and the general good.
They were very polemical pieces in the sense they were kind of propaganda for the Constitution, but they've taken on an immense importance that were really much more important than they were at the time.
Although they were writing for an immediate audience, I think they did have one eye half-cocked on later generations. But the fact that it's so systematic and comprehensive, and that some of the essays are so nuanced and so learned, means that we have to be a little bit suspicious as to how well, or a little bit doubtful, as to how well it really represented what people were thinking at the time. I often wonder what people at the time, what sense they could have made of it.
Virginia ratified the Constitution in June of 1788, and New York soon followed. With the support of these 2 states, the new government moved closer to legitimacy, in spirit as well as in fact.
Our Constitution is in actual operation, and everything appears to promise that it will last. But in this world, nothing can be said to be certain but death and taxes.
All right, so the Federalist Papers, who penned them? Who authored them? Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Good. These guys were Federalists in the sense that they could see a clear need for a stronger federal government. Where were they published? New York newspapers. Write it down. They're publishing them in New York's newspapers. And they're designed to convince New Yorkers of, well, why it would be advantageous to have a stronger federal government and a constitution. So for your notes, these are papers, articles really, that are published in New York newspapers designed to convince New Yorkers as to why a stronger federal government would be a necessity, would be advantageous. Now, if you read in your big green book this week, you'll come across Federalist number 10. And in this case, Alexander Hamilton talks about the issue of factions, what we would call special interest groups, right? And these special interest groups can be some of the most evil, disgusting things that you could possibly think of. They can be tiny, tiny, tiny when it comes to their population, and they can also become exceptionally, exceptionally powerful, okay? But if you have a strong central government, Hamilton and Madison make the case that it's much, much more difficult for these minorities, these factions, if you will, to gain any kind of real traction. So it's much less likely with a stronger federal government that they can do any kind of real harm versus in a weaker central government where there's all kinds of different ways for them to manipulate the process. Okay? Questions? Now, one of the other things that both New York and Virginia, but also other bigger states, had concern over was the almighty powerful or support, rather, that could be yielded from a strong central government. They were worried about civil rights and civil liberties. They said, what's to stop the American government from doing the same thing and abusing the same rights that the British government was abusing not less than 10 years ago, right? So what we wanted, we being the bigger states, was some guarantee that Congress would not do that. What we got were the Bill of Rights, okay? What are the Bill of Rights, everybody? What are they? They are laws. They are the first 10 amendments, 10 changes to the Constitution. So that needs to be in your notes. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And they are designed to protect, to ensure our civil rights and our civil liberties. They're designed to protect and ensure, to guarantee Congress will not make a law that jeopardizes this civil right or this civil liberty, what we have an ability to do in a political society like this. Now, let me spell this out for you. I think you'll have a good time with this. I always do. You would be shocked. I saw a very disturbing statistic the other day that over 40% of adult Americans could not name one right of the First Amendment. You have the right to, under the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Very good. That 40% is not in this class. Freedom of speech. Good. Very good. Religion. What? And I heard somebody over there. The press. Good. What else? No, that's not the first one. Assembly. Anything else? No, that's not it. Petition. You have the right to petition your government. Right, now you get petitions all the time, right? You get petitions through your email. Hey, sign this. Tell Congress to do that. Sometimes in Blockbuster's parking lot, right? Especially on Greenville there. You get this hippie-looking guy that comes up to you and he's got a petition that he wants you to sign that says legalize marijuana, right? Or some other narcotic. But you need to keep in mind when that guy comes up to you, you're all scared because he kind of looks a little methy, you know? Right? All he's doing is exercising his First Amendment right to petition the government. That you would have a direct connection. And Congress would not pass a law that limits that. Right? That you would have this direct connection to your lawmakers that wouldn't be jeopardized. Now, I heard somebody mention the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And we all watch Family Guy. So we all know how simple of a law this is. We all have the right to mount a set of bear arms above our beds, right? Yes. The Second Amendment is one of the most misunderstood and controversial aspects of the Bill of Rights. What the Second Amendment actually says is we would have the right to maintain a well-regulated militia and people would have the ability to hold on to weapons even inside their homes. Right? The right to bear arms inside their homes. To maintain a well-regulated militia. Yeah?
It was not also militia, wasn't it also to rebel against the government if they do?
That's exactly where I wanted to go. No. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer and I don't claim to be. But if they wanted you to have the ability, at any given moment, to be able to overthrow a tyrannical government, if that government became tyrannical, they wouldn't have said you had the right to bear arms. They would have said you have the right to things like, what are instruments of war? Weapons, generally speaking, but you have the right to warships, and you have the right to cannon, and you have the right to these other instruments of military use. It's really vague, and that's probably why we get so hung up on it in this day and age. But a common misperception is that the only reason that the Founding Fathers had this was so that at any given moment, if we need to, we can be running into the streets of America ready to do battle with the government. It's a misinterpretation, and I won't be told different by people like Glenn Beck, right? Now, is that clear? I mean, we can continue to debate this if you'd like. Questions? We'll come back to this in a minute, okay? The Third Amendment, we're getting a little more abstract now. What's the Third Amendment?
Prevents ordering.
Prevents quartering, is that said?
Sure.
Yep, you're right. Conditions on soldiers, quartering soldiers. This Congress will not make a law that requires the citizens of America to put up the president's soldiers. Okay? Responding to that law, those laws rather, that were coming out in the 1760s and 70s. Right? The Fourth Amendment. Right of, there you go, search and seizures. Okay? If a law enforcement official wants to look through your things, what do they need? A warrant issued by a court, or probable cause. You roll down the window and it smells like a meth lab in there, right? Then yeah, they're probably going to come in and take a look around, right? But if that's not the case, theoretically they don't have that right. Now, one of my favorite rights is the Fifth, right? What's the Fifth?
Due process.
Yeah, but in layman's terms, the provisions concerning prosecution. Close. Prosecution, right? You remember the Chappelle Show, those of you who like to watch Dave Chappelle? Right, you remember that episode where the Wall Street banker traded places with the drug dealer? Right? What if we gave drug dealers in America the same kind of consideration that we give Wall Street bankers that break laws? Right? Dave Chappelle was the drug dealer. And every time the Senate Investigatory Committee asked him a question, what did he say? Plead the Fifth, right? I mean, the words aren't even out of this guy's mouth yet. He says, Fifth. Anything you say, Fifth, right? What the Fifth Amendment says, guys, is that you have the right not to bear witness against yourself. So a real high-profile case like the George Zimmerman case, right, over the summer, right? Did you see George Zimmerman taking the stand? Did the prosecution say, we call George Zimmerman to the witness stand? And they asked him, hey, did you do it? Did you profile Trayvon Martin? Did that ever happen? Because Zimmerman has the Fifth Amendment in his back pocket. And what he can say, even if the prosecution were to call him, I refuse to answer your question based on the fact that I believe it could incriminate me. Right? So again, it's responding to things like these vice admiralty courts that we saw emerge during the 1760s and 70s. The Sixth Amendment. Yeah, you're right to close. A speedy trial. All right? If you are arrested, right, what does the government, or in this case the local police department, have to do within a very short amount of time? Well, that's initially, you have a right to remain silent, a right to an attorney, so on and so forth, but they also have to charge you, right? They charge you with something. They can't just say, you know, I don't like the look on your face, or you're coming downtown, right? You're jaywalking, you are suspected of being a drug dealer. Something. They need to officially charge you and read you those charges. You are formally charged, right?
Like you're under arrest for suspicion of murder?
Exactly, right? That we have a very good reason to believe, and then it goes to trial, right? And that jury is ultimately going to determine your fate, okay? So you have a speedy trial. They can't arrest you, throw you in jail, and lose the key, so to speak. Okay. The Seventh Amendment, trial by jury. None of this British Vice Admiralty Court where a judge serves as judge, jury, and executioner. Right? You have the right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Now, you can waive your rights. You can waive your right. You can have a judge serve for you. But at the same time, you are afforded this right. It's your decision. Okay? The Eighth Amendment, again, one of my favorites.
Prohibits excessive fines.
Uh-huh.
And a cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah. Excessive punishment, generally speaking. Right? So, you're a little bit too young to remember this, but back in the 90s, there was this punk kid, this rich kid, he's American, but he was over in Singapore vandalizing expensive cars, like graffiti on a Mercedes, something like that, right? So the police caught him, they arrested him, and you know how the Singapore government punished people that were doing this? What? Yeah, a really bad spanking, like a caning, which is kind of making Frederick Douglass's whippings look like kids' play. Right? They would say that the people that would be caned would literally pass out because the pain was so intense. Now, the president of the United States at the time is Bill Clinton, and he gets on the phone with the diplomats over in Singapore, he says, hey, you know, over in America, which is the person that you're holding prisoner over there, we've got this thing called the Eighth Amendment, which prevents people from doing things like what you're about to do to one of our citizens. And what did the Singapore government say to Bill? We ain't in America, right? And so what we did was we showed them what American asses were made of, right? Seriously, they came. Anyway.
Because I don't understand the statement.
What?
I don't understand the statement.
Yeah, exactly. they came there. They strip you down, bare naked, and they, from what I understand of it, they handcuff your hands to your ankles, and they take a cane and they beat the daylights out of you. Right? So your backside. That's right. So anyway, in more of an American context, if you're a prisoner and you happen to be Jewish, can they force you to eat pork chops or bacon, even though it's really, really cheap? Or I'm not saying that pork is cheap, but they cannot if you happen to be a practicing Jew, because you say that's against my religion, and so therefore you have to afford these individuals other things to eat outside of pork. So anyway, that's the Eighth Amendment. Stay with me, guys. The Ninth Amendment. Rule of the Constitution. If it's in there, it's the law. There's no debating that law. You have to abide by that law. But if it's not in there, it leads me to the 10th Amendment. Rights of the states. If it's not explicitly spelled out, the same way that we don't explicitly have a requirement to have a state income tax, the states will have the discretion and the ability to pick it up from there. Now, I have a question before you pack up. How good of a job have we done protecting these rights? Are any one of these rights absolute? Does it say you have the absolute right to say what you want when you want? You have the absolute right to bear arms in the middle of Times Square. Does it say that? No. So what you see here is something that's essentially, at the discretion of the powers that be in any given moment in American history, right? You don't remember this, but there was once upon a time where you could go into an airport, you could see your loved ones, your friends off, you could go right up to the jetway, right? And you could hug and kiss them goodbye, and nobody said a word to you. And in this day and age, you get dirty looks from the TSA if you go too far with your wife, with your kids, when you're dropping them off at GFW Airport. Now, is the government doing that for any just random reason? They're doing that because things have changed.
Yes,
We're talking exactly. We're talking about a post 9/11 world, and things aren't the same way that they were in the 70s, 80s, or post the 90s.
Like
Yeah.
Like the treatment of the German population during World War II.
Exactly, right? In times of emergencies, you'll see that some of these things can go away, or at least to some extent they can go away. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. We're out of time. Have a very good day, and we'll see you on Wednesday. I don't know what your schedule is for the rest of the day, but I'll put that